We have no attendees, so I don't think that worked.
Hello.
Hello.
Hold on, what a clusterfuck. Hold on.
Should I just start sharing?
Yeah, just go ahead.
Cool. One. You know how to use a computer.
No, don't cancel, don't cancel. Okay. Fuck. Create new attendee email. Okay. New link.
Think. Think.
Include event details. Send now. I don't want to send a text message. I just want to send it. How do I send this? To all attendees. Where's the acknowledgement? There we go. Send now.
Just to confirm. So the only thing you guys currently see is
Yes.
the actual slide itself. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
no,
Because
we
otherwise I'm gonna
see,
like drag the notes over and look like a
I see
dumbass,
your, I see your top bar, but that's it.
including this guy or just this.
Uh, I just see that you have two tabs open.
Oh, nope, that's fine.
There's
I can
bookmarks.
live with that.
Well, I don't know. Let's see if this works. What a nightmare. Because we still have no attendees. Let me just double check and see if we have our email. Um,
What's the one? Get rescheduled.
Still no attendees. I don't know. This is the webinar. It's oh, we got one attendee. Excellent.
Progress.
Welcome, Levi. Thank you for your persistence in trying to get into this webinar because we had some technical issues. And apparently the email is going out very slowly. There's comes people. Yay, we did it, guys. Thank you everybody
Participants.
for your patience.
Yay.
Well, we will also be recording this so folks that tried to get in and couldn't and gave up can watch the recording. And we'll make sure to send that out to folks. We'll give it a couple more minutes because we want to give people a chance to see that in their email. Hi, everyone. Welcome. As you no doubt know, we had some technical issues, so we're going to give it another minute or two to let folks find the link. and hop on.
I'm sure that you all already say it, but the people who are already here, I definitely encourage you to use the Q&A over asking questions through chat. It's just easier to see them, and we can like mark them as answered and stuff. That way we know what people are asking, which is nice. Though, go nuts. Use chat. Chat at each other like crazy.
Welcome, folks. If you want to drop your name and your organization or where you're from in the chat bar, that would be great. As I said, as you all know, we had some technical difficulties with our link because we rescheduled the webinar. So I'm going to give folks another 2 minutes to see the email and hop on. And then worst case scenario, we'll be emailing the link out to the recording so everybody can see it there, that we're not able to hop on time. Hello, Ricky. Welcome. I hope everyone is enjoying nice weather wherever they are, because our weather in Pittsburgh has been terrible. Rainy and windy and awful.
Ricky always has good weather. I'm always jealous of the second helpings team.
Yeah. Yes, Atlanta is in a good spot. Let's see. Ohio, also terrible weather. Yes. Dayton is probably close enough that you're getting the same weather that we are. Lots of rain, lots of wind, lots of grossness. Lots of Ohio folks. Hey, Mid-Atlantic. All right, we've got a few more people that have found their link. That's excellent. We haven't started yet. If you've just joined us, we are giving folks a minute to find their link. We apologize for the slow start and the just twice delayed now webinar. I apologize, everybody. I was very sick last week. I came back from Waste Expo with a death cold, and I just was not up to leading a webinar. So I encourage folks to do it without me, but alas, I could not get out of it. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and we're going to slow roll into this right now. Folks that are just coming in, please put your name and your organization into the chat so we can see who's here. We're really excited to have Sean Hudson, our Director of Data and Analytics at Food Rescue Hero, join us today. Sean is a magic worker when it comes to numbers and data, and it's always really exciting to see the analysis he does. So if you've ever seen any of our white papers or our impact calculator or anything like that, Sean is the brilliant mind behind a lot of that. So thank you, Sean. Can you flip to the next slide? Reminder, drop your Q&A in the Q&A. Drop your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. The chat rolls by real fast sometimes, although we've got a smaller group of intrepid folks this week, so maybe not. We are recording this, and we will be sending this out for folks that, if you want to go back and check something that he said, don't worry about trying to make sure that you get everything now by taking frantic notes. We will be sending it out. And then we'll provide some links at the end of the webinar. With that, Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah. As Jen already said, I'm Sean Hudson, the Director of Data and Analytics at Food Rescue Hero and 412 Food Rescue. It is the same organization, technically. All right. So today's topic is, kind of what the name of the thing was, right? Increase efficiency without increasing your payroll. So more rescues, but with the same staff. That's kind of the more important efficiency that we think about, right? We're not usually getting rid of people. Everyone wants to grow their impact, but scaling is expensive and unpredictable, right? Like we can hire more dispatchers, we can get more people placing the rescues, but we don't know how many calls we're going to get on a given day.
And I'm going to stop you there because I want to just define what a dispatcher is, because not everybody uses that language. So when we talk about dispatchers at Food Rescue Hero, we're talking about the folks that are staffing the app, that are receiving one-time donations, that are making sure that volunteers are assigned to rescues that don't have any issues. They're the ones that are handling the day-to-day traffic, the sort of like air traffic control of the actual food rescue operations.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. So how can we use data to scale in a smart way, right? Can we keep the same staff? Can we strategically place who we hire when we hire people, right? Um, so from the admin side, that we know that recurring rescues are a more efficient type of rescue. Once they're assigned, they don't need constant outreach or approvals to increase they increase the lifetime value of a given donor, right? So recurring rescues, I think in our network, we still often call them, it's like an artifact of what we used to do. We call them weekly rescues. They can be on any given cadence that you can think of, but basically they publish or are given to a volunteer who completes them on some expected cadence, right? Volunteers know when and where to go, and coordinators can step back unless something goes wrong, which is nice. That makes them an ideal target for kind of operational improvements. Across our network, about 80% of completed rescues are recurring. At 412 Food Rescue specifically, it's about 90 on average. So at any given day, about 90% of those rescues are recurring. It's actually much higher on weekends. Usually, there aren't very many rescues on weekends. In fact, for this analysis, we actually kind of put out weekends entirely. But what'll happen is if you get two ad hocs, suddenly that ratio shifts quite a bit. But for the most part, our rescues that happen on weekends, unless something happens, they are recurring.
Wait, go back to that for a second, because I don't know
Yeah.
what that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that. We get a little bit more into exactly what this is,
Yeah,
but
dumb this down for me, Sean. I love
so this
I
is
love data, but I don't know what this is.
on our x-axis. So on the bottom here, that is the percent of rescues on a given day that are recurring.
Mhm.
So if you have 10 rescues and 5 of them are recurring, that's 50%, right? That's right. I'm moving my cursor, like you can see it right
Yeah,
in the middle where it says 50. As you go up, you see that there's kind of a soft ceiling, right? There aren't very many instances where the share is low, but the count is high. It exists, it happens, but that's usually part of like an event or something. More when I looked into it, it's usually part of a distressed load situation where a whole bunch of rescues are picked up from a couple of trucks, or you see just special events where a single donor will put together a big collection of rescues at schools. A lot of times, actually, we find end of year backpack events, that kind of thing. But what is also pretty clear here is the trend, right? So as that share increases, so too do the completed like rescues that can be completed in a given day. And a lot of that has to do with capacity, probably. We did check this for robustness. It is de-identified here, but across organizations that trend holds, right? So it isn't just that bigger organizations have more daily rescues and also have higher share. We don't have like you can look it up later. I'm not going to get into it, but what's known as like a Simpsons paradox, where actually if you spread it out, you get the opposite effect. It isn't anything like that. So I did my homework on this.
So go back. We're not done yet. I'm going to talk about this a little more. So, I mean, it does sort of, it makes a lot of logical sense, because if you have a regular recurring rescue that you don't have to provide maintenance for on a regular basis, you don't have to touch that rescue most days. It gives you the capacity to do more of those in a given day, right? It gives you the ability to then also bring in more ad hoc rescues or do one-time rescues on that given day. So, that's sort of, in some ways, it seems like common sense, right? But it's really great to look at the data and be able to see that if you really want to grow your capacity, having a certain amount of scheduled rescues is going to let you grow your capacity without necessarily growing your staff.
Yeah. That's, almost entirely because of the administrative overhead that it eliminates. Things still happen. We still need our dispatchers to touch those rescues, but it lets the dispatchers do the hard part, which is taking those calls, from people, donors, recipients, and finding where that food can reliably go. And then, since it's an ad hoc, kind of staying in touch with all three components, right? Our volunteers, our donors, and our recipients. Usually nonprofit partners, occasionally households, right? Some people do that. But yeah. So what do we find drives daily rescue volume? So we did do a regression. This isn't the whole table. You don't need to see the whole table though. This is all the things that matter. When we did this regression, we found kind of three big things. One, Fridays are kind of everyone's biggest day. That could be for a lot of reasons. I think it's because a lot of people at grocery stores in particular, their management and admin people just kind of aren't going to be there over the weekend. So they get rid of the stuff that they're going to get rid of. You can see that you will notice like on here, there isn't a fry. That is because it is the constant in that case, right? Don't have to get into exactly what that means, but basically all of those other days are relative to Friday, and you see that every other weekday is less than Friday. More dispatchers does increase the daily rescue count a little bit, but dispatchers can't necessarily know when we're going to get more calls, right? So putting those in there, putting more dispatchers in there is risky if that's your goal. Of note in this, technically the range was 1 to 12 people creating rescues on a given day. Almost all of them were 2 or less. So, grain of salt. This is not a uniform distribution on dispatchers. So, it's hard to get a lot of findings. What we do know though is that adding more doesn't necessarily increase your volume. It makes it a little easier to place them probably, but that's about it. But as you saw on that chart before, more recurring rescues as a higher share of your total rescue count being recurring almost invariably means more daily rescues, right? And that is because you made them, you made them months ago and now they're happening today, right? Jen, you got anything? Sorry,
No.
I did that just as you were coughing on purpose. So yeah, we know that recurring share is the key rescue driver, right? A 10% increase in recurring rescue share, this means 2.5 more rescues a day. So, and that's across all of our organizations. Many are much smaller than 412 Food Rescue. We do over 100 a day on average. So, I mean, like a 10% share is like 10 rescues for us. But across the board, even among very small ones, just increasing your recurring share down the line pays big dividends. Today, it gives you more rescues, and also weeks, months. We have a couple rescues that are years old and are still happening. They're going well. Like I said, adding dispatchers is helpful, and when you have enough ad hocs, you might need to do that. But managing donor relationships to encourage regular donation is a cost-effective way to get more rescues, both in terms of budget and opportunity cost, right? When people are reaching out to donors, they might not be able to place rescues, right? Although I know that everyone here basically works in nonprofits and is doing double and triple duty. So do with that what you will. What you want to do is optimize your structure, not just your head count. Any other points here?
Yeah, no, I just think that's a really good point, that we're all working with really limited resources. And when we are thinking about putting in place a plan to grow, and we know we want to grow, we want to rescue more food and get it to more people and have a higher impact. How do we make the case for how we want to grow? You've got to go to your funders, you've got to go to your board. And so data like this can show that it is maybe a lot more effective to invest in tools and then relationship manager level employees, as opposed to just more that sort of dispatcher level.
My camera's behaving weirdly, but that's okay. We're gonna keep on moving. So what's the catch? It seems like a slam dunk, right? Back out. All right. Seems like a slam dunk. More recurring rescues. Nothing can go wrong. We know that isn't strictly true, right? What is the number one problem of recurring rescues, and actually probably by extension of that, just because so many of them are, no donations.
Well, I want to
Um,
actually stop there because this is also assuming that you've solved the other really difficult problem, which is your volunteers not showing up at your donor, right? So, and I guess I should add, like, we've solved that, and that's kind of one of the first hurdles. But once you get past that, the tendency is to think, well, we're good now, right? But their next problem, as you show, is that no donation from donor, that becomes then the next like elusive goal to try to figure out how to fix. And I know this is endemic across the industry. I hear this from everybody, is how frustrating it can be to have donors with no donation.
yeah. Now, obviously, it is sort of expected, right? The vast majority of no donation rescues are ones that are scheduled and recurring. Um, if you have a problem where there is no donation on an ad hoc, then that is a different sort of problem, where maybe you need to yell at somebody. I don't know. That's not good. If someone just called you and said there was food there, and then the volunteer arrives, this is a problem that is going to be harder to solve with data, and one that is just going to need um, a conversation. With that said, unfortunately, with no donations, sometimes it's because volunteers don't call, sometimes it's because we don't check it. A lot of things can happen, right? Usually we only find out that a no donation is a no donation after the volunteer has arrived at the donor location. This is bad. It's a waste of time and gas. Recipients don't like that. They are anticipating getting food that they will distribute, and they don't have it. And volunteers hate it. It's not good. It's already, I think anyone who kind of works in the food recovery space knows that our volunteers are incredible, and they are not easy to recruit. There's a it's just it is asking a lot, right? We frame it as kind of small things that you can do, but people who do this every single week are actually putting in quite a bit of time. So if they show up, many weeks in a row and this food isn't going here, you're really risking them never volunteering again. If that bad experience happens, it's going to start showing up. If you use an app, it's going to show up in your app store, Google reviews. It's all bad. You don't want that.
Well, I want to point out that you actually have done that analysis of our one-star reviews of rescues. So our volunteers can rate a rescue when they're finished with it. And the low ratings are almost entirely because there was no donation at the donor. So
It is the high 90s
yeah,
are,
we have
are the
that,
one-star reviews.
yeah, we have that data that shows that our dissatisfied volunteers are because there's no donation.
Yeah. And it's because they wasted their time, right? Like, if they knew and didn't go, they would just be a little disappointed that they didn't get to do something helpful. But now they're disappointed that not only did they not get to do something helpful, they wasted an hour. So what do we do? So can we predict? Looking back, predict what happens next. We took about 2 years worth of rescues. Got rid of the ones that are canceled for like holidays, things like that. So just kind of looked at the two categories: no donation, successful donation. And what we did with that data set was we created a lagged variable and then stacked them up next to each other and grouped them out into this little contingency table, right? We focused on past behavior,
I
whether
don't know
whether
what
or
that
not the
means, but
Now, I got you. We're gonna get into it. So specifically, like whether the previous rescue at the same donor was successful, and that gave us a really simple lagged approach. A lagged variable just means that we're looking at what happened the last time at the same location to see if it affects what happens this time or is closely related to it. When you compare these outcomes, this time based on what happened last time, we find that something pretty important. If the last rescue was a no donation, the chance of the next rescue or this rescue also being a no donation becomes much higher. You can kind of see that in that table there, right? So in the top left, no donation preceded by no donation, pretty common. No donation preceded by successful donation, a little more than half of them. If you go back two, it actually goes the other way around, right? So if you go back two donations, more than half of no donations had at least one within 2 weeks. But this was such a strong signal we didn't even. Successful donation preceded by a no donation. It happens about 10% of the time, right? Not even. No, just over in this. And then successful donations are vast majority of the time, 90-ish% preceded by a successful donation. I did what's known as a chi-squared on this, just to see. All that is a test to see if these look like they are or are not related to each other. So it kind of compares the null hypothesis, which is just, if we don't expect any relationship between the two, what do we think what would that table look like? And it looks statistically at that difference, right? In our case, we found a big one, the p-value super tiny, which means the probability of that event happening by chance is exceedingly small. It's like 1 in tens of millions it ends up being. But yeah, so good reason to think that these two things are connected, right? But you don't even need to do all that. You can look at this. So what we had, if the last rescue was a donation, this one had about a 39% chance of also being a donation. But if the last rescue was successful, it's closer to 10. That's a difference of about 29 points. Points like across the board, which is huge. That's a 4-fold increase in the probability. So this is really, to get these numbers specifically, these aren't, you might notice that these don't quite look like this. We used conditional probability to look at this, to kind of give ourselves like slightly more credible intervals. It's basically asking what is the chance of getting a no donation this time based on what the last one was, and then comparing the two. So that's a kind of a Bayesian predictor. This is all just to say that we used some like statistics to get the most intuitive and actionable results. So, actually, Jen, do you have anything else to say about these beyond like the stats of it? Just wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it is interesting because, as again, looking at the numbers, it feels a little bit like common sense. Like, of course, a donor that doesn't have something is going to be like, they're going to be difficult donors. That's something you kind of learn over time. But at the same time, the data really, really shows that 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 is an indicator of future failure and should require intervention.
So what is cool about this, right? What can you do with that information? I'll tell you what ops did. They, specifically Becca, if any of you have met Becca, she's very good at her job. She
And that's
implemented a check-in process. So
rescue.
yes, yeah, with us. So if a rescue was specifically a recurring rescue was a no donation, 2 or 3 times, in a pretty narrow window, then she would do a check-in. So she would call, see if there was anything going on with it. Sometimes that would just be enough to get them back on track. Like sometimes management changes over and they sort of forget about it. So, sometimes some signage just came down. So people just forget about it. They fix that. Other times it's just kind of not working out. They don't have the donations when it's there. Maybe they did it first and they don't now, just because, grocery store. Yeah. And in those cases, those were just canceled. Not a big deal, because those rescues aren't happening anyway, right? So what we saw was shortly after Rebecca implemented that, which would be sometime in 2023. What we saw was the rate of no donation per day dropped to like less than half of its peak.
That is really convincing data on the impact and effectiveness of having a donor manager take action on this.
Yeah, and that was done with almost no extra work that wasn't already happening, right? So I mean, obviously our dispatching has to cancel things. Our volunteers arrive and hit no donation, that kind of thing. So there is the normal overhead of just canceling rescues. But when ones that aren't working out don't happen in the future, you also get rid of that overhead, right? You reduce it overall. So this is a case where we didn't really have well, we did. We went without a donor relationships manager for a little bit, and it was already climbing just because there were a lot of issues. But once that person was gone, it skyrocketed. Just almost no management of it at all, and it became it went from, I mean, you can see it right here, right? It went from high before that time, 12% to like almost 20. In fact, a lot of days it was that high. So not good. A lot of angry volunteers, especially since most of us know most of our volume done by volunteers is accounted by a fairly small amount of volunteers. So people are showing up to multiple places a day and finding nothing. Bad, not good at all. Uh, but the whole point of this is we didn't just guess, right? That intervention came about with this data. So we found our biggest lever, which is probably managing the relationships with our donors. That is our supply of food. We can get volunteers. Our rescues get claimed. That's great. We solved that. It is hard to do, and we did it with an app. In our case, we identified the most common issue, no donation. That is more. It's more than half of our total cancellations, and it's like 2/3 of our recurring cancellations. And then we use that data to predict, intervene, validate our impact, right? By we can see it appears to have worked.
Yeah,
And
this is and this is so I find this so interesting. I love this stuff. And we have really good data and we have Sean. So we're lucky that we have a lot of the tools we need to do this kind of fancy in-depth analysis with things that I don't understand, like chi-squares and p-values. However, you can do a lot with the data you have, whatever data you have, because I know everybody's keeping some data and a little bit of analysis. And then there's also a lot of data professionals around in every university town, right? And they're always looking for projects. So this is the type of thing that you could probably work with some students on in a data science program and have them run some analysis for a paper and give you the type of information that you need so that you can go to your board, you can go to your donors, and you can say, we understand, where we need to invest in order to have more impact. And that sort of due diligence and legwork is, I mean, funders love that stuff, right? They love to see that you are not just kind of guessing, but you have a strong sort of objective, quote unquote, reason for what you're doing.
yeah, I think this alone justified the entire position of donor manager. So
Yeah.
yeah, like that, just dropping that low would have been enough. Does so much more. But if you've seen like our pickups from the Pirates Stadium, Heinz Field, no, not Heinz, the other one, uh,
PNC Park.
PNC Park. Also Becca's idea. It was very good. It's cool. It made the news. And I think she just got 30 under 30
She
uh,
did.
around here.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
Becca's amazing. And
among the
another
many other things, that our donor relationship manager does, this alone would have done it, right? And it was very cool to get to work on this kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I want to go back a little bit and just talk about some of the stuff we did early. And we're going to get to questions now too. But for folks that again are thinking that some of this seems really complex, just even really, really basic level. Like, for example, looking at missed rescues. How many rescues do you not have a volunteer show up for? And looking for patterns. And we did that early on before we even had an app, when we were looking at our data in a totally different way. We were able to kind of identify which rescues we were not getting volunteers to pick up and then target our volunteer recruitment. Or identify other problems. We found we had a rescue that was on a major artery leaving the city of Pittsburgh that was supposed to be picked up at 4 o'clock every day. So it was mid rush hour and nobody wanted to do it. And we just worked with that donor to change the pickup time. But even that sort of basic level of data analysis can give you a lot of really good actionable information.
Yeah, a lot of times just knowing what your grouping variable should be is enough. Like in this case, it was outcome previous one. That was it. That covered 90% of this.
Can you say grouping variable in English?
Yeah, so in this case, right, we have imagine that this is a big table. We have a big table of all our rescues, right? and we have whether, for this one, we know it was successful, and we know what the last one was. So successful or no donation. What we did was we grouped those together. So on the combination of successful, we counted them. Successful, no donation, we counted them. No donation, successful, we counted that. No donation, we counted that. That's how we got these numbers. So we grouped it down and then just got like a total. In that case, it was just a tally. You can do that with like some, as in like adding them all together, that kind of stuff. If you want to do that with weight or other rescue counts, those are the thing that we do our summary statistics on, right? So this one is outcome. It can be location. It can be food type, donor type. You can do anything. And just knowing how your data should be grouped will often be enough to get you an answer.
Yeah. And also, I feel like some of the questions might be, well, I don't know where to look, but you do, because you know what your pain points are. You know what upsets volunteers, you know what upsets donors, you know where your staff is spending time. Like, you know what your pain points are. And I'm sure everybody has data around those pain points. We have a question.
Actually, before I get to the question, to that point, I like to think of that as specifically like the art of data analysis, right? You aren't going to be able to just look at a data set and like run it through the magic data analyst machine and know what you need to be focusing on. We're getting there with some stuff, right? Like it is getting pretty good. But what you need to do is think about those pain points and think what could be the cause of this, right? Like what is the process that results in this data, and then find what the points are that can do that, right? So we thought about that. We thought about our outcomes and grouped there, and we found that result. Other times it could be day of week, it could be weather. So you have to make a hypothesis and then form your analysis around it. So you start with the easier stuff, and once you can get more in depth as you go, but it's finding the easy points. If it looks like there might be something there, you dig a little deeper. It looks like there's something there, you go until you don't need to anymore. In this case, it took very little. This was actually a really simple analysis.
Yeah.
All
But
right,
you
we
get-
have a question.
Yes, we have, and again, we could get super sophisticated. We have a lot of data. You have done some really more in-depth analysis, but most folks can handle, have the type of data they need to do something like this. All right, so the question is, 70% of this is from Ricky Hyde. Thank you, Ricky. 70% of our partner agencies are closed on Monday for Memorial Day, and reroutes are challenging. How do you use analytics to assist with holiday scheduling?
That is a good question. Our ops team kind of preempted this question. So they look ahead a fair ways to know where there are going to be cancellations because of that. So if they know that there is a big holiday, they kind of divide things up, right? They know who is going to be receiving on those days. They find the future rescues based in part on those recurrences, right? And then they will contact places. They will make sure that donors are open and recipients are open a lot of the time. And then if they know that they won't be, they will start proactively reaching out. So knowing how far in advance you need to do that is helpful. That's also where it's just helpful to know like how far in advance volunteers are likely to claim something. Like, it might not matter when you make a rescue available, depending on how you do it, or when you start contacting volunteers, if they tend to only select it on the day of, then that's when you start doing your volunteer outreach. It's not a big deal. But you know that if you are fortunate and stuff tends to get scooped up more or less as you post it, regardless of how far out in the future it is, sooner is better, probably. As long as you don't have problems with like people remembering where they're supposed to be. So in that case, it's just kind of looking at our calendars, looking at what we know is going to happen. Especially if you find like within your data places that are a little harder to work with in general, just because like they're harder to reach, they're just less people, that kind of thing. Those are the ones you want to focus on, and that you will sometimes find that in the data, especially if you're looking at rescues canceled for reasons that probably could have been avoided. Like those are good ones to focus on.
And I want to add, actually, this is a really a good time to mention data hygiene and data accuracy, because your data isn't just what you picked up when, it's also information about your donors and information about your nonprofit partners that are receiving food. You need to have accurate information about them. And I've seen some folks get, in the heat of the moment, I've done it, everybody's done it. You get a new donor in or a new nonprofit and you're a little sloppy about entering their information and you don't put in what their hours are, or what kind of food they take, or any of that information, and then you don't go back to it because you did that while you were really busy. Well, that means that you now have incomplete data. So you really need to have a good you need to keep good records, good data about all of your partners as well, because that will make those sorts of occurrences easier to deal with. And a lot of folks know we're closed. They know their yearly schedule. We're closed on these days. Some folks won't. Some folks, like if you work with housing like we do, there might be residents that can take stuff anytime. And then it's sort of a catch-all. Maybe they're traveling for that Christmas, or they're going to be at their sister's house or whatever, and so they're not going to be around. But in general, most organizations are going to know when they're open and closed throughout the year. And so just getting that information accurately up front can save you a lot of time in the long run. All right, we've got another question from Levi Grimm. Do you find a correlation between the types of food available or the pounds available and a volunteer's willingness to claim? Testing the assumption that volunteers are more likely to claim rescues with large amounts of fresh produce rather than small amounts of bread or pastries. Have you looked at that, Sean?
Right. So we have actually, so does that, kind of affect people's propensity to claim things? We haven't seen a lot of that in our app. That what we found is that claiming behavior tends to more closely relate to, especially with ad hocs, to rescues that are close to them. Kind of regardless of the size, people will take small amounts of things. They aren't always happy if they get like a tiny bag of something, especially if it's a recurring rescue that they routinely move a lot of food on. And then they get, I don't know, a small bag of tomatoes. They are usually not thrilled, but that rarely impacts the propensity of people to claim, in part because I think a lot of donors are not super likely to call with an ad hoc of very small bags of things.
Yeah.
What I will say is, though we do absolutely accept things like non-perishables, I don't know, probably 60% of our food is fresh. Fully a third of it is produce. So that could be a chicken or egg thing, right? It could just be that we are self-selected into that situation where we don't get tons of them. But I think it's reasonable to expect that, someone looking at the details of a rescue will consider if it's like worth it or not, which is something to consider, right? If it's a very large rescue, it's hard to get someone with a tiny car in there. If it's a really small rescue, especially if you're calling to get it placed, that might be a harder sell.
Yep. And I will say there are some volunteers that don't want the big rescues with big boxes of heavy produce, right? We have bagel shops that deliver, and there are people that are perfectly happy to make their impact by going and picking up a very easy to transport bag of bagels. So I think, when we match a donation with a place, we're looking for somewhere that it's going to fit, that's going to make sense. So we're not sending a tray of sandwiches to a housing site with 500 families, right? Or 100 pounds of cucumbers to a site that serves 10 people on a drop-in day. Similarly, our volunteers run the gamut, and they will find the rescues that make sense for them. Some variety is actually helpful in that sense. The next question, and I think I'm going to answer this one, is how do you maintain data integrity when some volunteer partner agencies estimate the weight of the rescues and others report the actual weights? So this is something we wrestled with a lot in the early days of 412 Food Rescue. And we tried having nonprofit partners report the weight. We tried having donors report the weight. And we ended up having our volunteers confirm the size of the donation. And then we estimate the weight from there. There are some things we know the exact weight on. We might get a donor that gives us, 3 pallets of cucumbers, and every box weighs, 20 pounds. So we'll know exactly, but most of it is, boxes of mixed produce, like from a grocery store. And we know that on average, a box of produce weighs X number of pounds. And then that's just the amount we assign to every box of produce, every banana box of produce. And it evens out, because some are going to be more heavy, some are going to be lighter, but overall, the average is a good estimate. And that's about as good as any food rescue organization is really going to be able to provide, no matter what they tell you, because nobody's weighing everything. They're just not. Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, basically that. A lot of it is simply yes and, right? Communicating that that is just sometimes the case, right? If we are making people aware that, this is probably not an exact number, then I am fine. If we always say that, then I'm fine using that in public facing things.
Yep.
If someone is asking for an audit and we know that things are estimated, and we know that, this is a recurring rescue that a volunteer does all the time and doesn't always edit the amount on, I will say I'm not comfortable giving you audit level stuff. I can tell you that these rescues happen, and they should on average be about this.
Yeah.
And if they need more closeness, then they also need to, the donors, if they are the ones asking for this information, they need to be good about keeping in touch with us and saying how much they're giving us.
Yep. And there are some donors that want that level of detail. And they track that, and they're basically looking at the Food Recovery Organization for confirmation. And so we can confirm that our data matches up then with their data, or close to. And that's close enough, I believe, for audit purposes for that business, because it's going to show that we're within a ballpark, figure of similarity. And so the way it works on our app is that we'll put in a donation. Will indicate either the exact amount or estimate. So if it's an estimate, it'll say, take everything the donor has. This is estimated what it is, so you know whether or not you can fit this in your car. And then they will increase or decrease the number of boxes. So it might be like 3 boxes of produce and 2 bags of bread. They'll increase or decrease the number of those, and then they can also add if there's anything else. Then we also encourage our volunteers to take a picture, which is a sort of another way that we can kind of audit and make sure that everything matches up.
Yeah. I've also found that it is, well, no, wait. We also have some cool things coming, probably in way of weight and stuff.
Yes.
We're doing cool stuff with it, and we are excited about it.
Yes. At some point in the future, we may have something very exciting to announce on that, but we don't yet. All right. Are there other questions? There's no more questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I will plug, oops, there's another one just popped up. Ricky Hyde again says, we need to conduct a route audit of our network. What data points would you suggest to evaluate rescues? We're thinking distance, average pounds rescued, pounds per mile. What else?
I like those. Those are all very good. Distance is helpful. Big route audit. It kind of depends on what you want to do with it, right? You're gonna probably want to look at the outcomes of those. Thinking about, are these getting canceled? Are people doing them? If you have a satisfaction metric, you should look at it. Of course, like a quarter of our rescues get rated, so grain of salt. Also, our volunteers are exceedingly kind and will 4-star things that no matter how bad it went. But looking at the qualitative feedback that we get from people is useful. Yeah, those kind of are they, right? Yeah, I really like using the pounds per mile and like the average rescue size. I think those are helpful. Maybe just a general weekday thing, like, do those things in addition to those routes themselves. Are there trends within the weekdays? Like, is a Monday an especially busy day with a lot of cancellations, because then maybe those need moved around a little bit, that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of enriching the data that you already have, getting things like weekdays, donor types can matter. Are there trends with the volunteer itself themselves, right? We know that people tend to pick a few people tend to pick up a lot of them. So if it is volunteer, if there is an issue or a volunteer does particularly well, it's worth if you discover that on the way. I like to let our volunteer people know that someone like is very close to hitting a milestone or they moved like a crazy amount of food on a given day, right? So that kind of thing.
I want to add, if you're using volunteers, I would look at missed rescues as well, to
Yeah.
again assess if this is an area that does not have enough volunteers to currently maintain the cadence of rescues. So you're going to need to either you're going to need to do something to address that. So that can be really good. And with our dispatchers, we tell them to, even if we can't find a volunteer for rescue, even if we call and reschedule it for the next day, it's recorded as a missed rescue because we want the data to show that for whatever reason, the ideal situation where a volunteer claims that rescue and does it on that day, that did not happen, so we can analyze it. So never pad your data. You can't learn anything from padded data. You need to be really, honest about what's happening in your operations in order to get a good analysis.
Yeah, a high rate of a bad metric is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You to know that is good, right? Like when we had that really high rate of no donation that looked bad, and we tried to make it a performance metric, and that makes sense to shift things around a little bit, right? But when we looked at it and we looked at the cause, like because we also didn't like to see high cancellation rates, but it doesn't make sense to keep doing a rescue that isn't happening, right? And then voila, the no donation rate gets cut in half, and no one is wasting their time.
Yeah, and one other thing about doing route audits, a couple years ago, we did two things. First, Sean looked at our rescues and what we rescue, took the refed data and created an impact calculator for for the data that goes through our app, so we know really much better, have a much better sense of what the environmental impact is. And then he analyzed the distance that food would have to go in order to, you explain it, Sean. I can never get this
Oh,
out
yeah, kind of the break even on it, right? So where it becomes a negative side of the equation. So
on the
where
environment. Yeah.
at what distance with what food type does it become a net negative in terms of like CO2 equivalents? And we found that you can travel about 1.5 miles per pound of food before it's an issue. So there's an exception, right? If it is just produce and not very much produce at that, then that's a little bit different. But the typical rescue makeup, that's what we use, just a network kind of average, what's usually in there, then you'd be surprised how far you can go.
Right.
If in fact, if it's a half a pound of meat, there is no way that you are placing that rescue somewhere that matters, that like has a negative impact in that sense. Is it worth their time? Maybe not, but
With the environmental impact. Yeah. And so that's something that's really great to think about too, as you're looking at your routes, you're doing a route analysis. A lot of folks kind of try to make the argument, well, you're driving around this food, volunteers are taking it. Is it actually doing anything for the environment? Yes, it actually is. And you can take a look and see how much food is being rescued on a particular route and how far it's going to sort of understand how big the impact is, or if it's something maybe you want to make it closer. Even if it's a net positive, driving something, 30 miles away might not be, what you want to be doing.
is that rescue itself even desirable? What I found is that it's very unlikely that you're going to have a problem environmentally speaking.
Yeah.
It's just like, is this rescue claimable? Is it worth doing that for other reasons? You will probably not have a negative environmental impact. It's just very hard to do. We made some generous assumptions on mileage too. We doubled it, for example, like we took the distance and we made it times two, and then used a high estimate for CO2 output per mile. So yeah, what we found was that it's pretty good. It is hard to not ultimately have a positive impact on the environment by doing this.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sean. We're at time and I want to respect everybody's time. So I did want to say that our next webinar, which is next week, I think. Yeah, it's next week, is sort of in part of the series on how to start a food rescue, but I think this is a great lesson for everybody, and it's how to have an effective marketing strategy, even if you don't have a lot of money or dedicated staff for that. And so that's not Michelle Sandage, that's actually Diane Walters, our
Okay, that's
director,
yeah.
who will be presenting that. And so I think that's going to be really interesting. And I encourage everybody to sign up and join us. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate you all being here and finding the link. You guys are the intrepid group that was able to find your way here. We will be sending out the link to this recording for everybody that was unable to join us today. My apologies to folks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.